Okay. How are you doing, guys? Teacher, how are you doing?
Hello, Luis.
On time. No, no a la Sofía.
Hello.
Hello, Giovanni, Andres, Christian.
Hi, teacher.
Hello.
How's it going?
Christian, good. Thank you.
Okay.
Christian is offline. Oh, okay.
He was here. I don't know if something happened.
Do you know if his babies are okay?
Well, we
I was
haven't been
asking
able
him
to
that.
speak a lot, but I know that he was there until I think he was in the hospital until Tuesday last week, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was able to go home because at some point they were like better, but they were because last week we had the first stage like of this quarantine. They weren't letting anyone leave the hospital
Uh-huh.
or move their cars or whatever. But eventually they said like, okay, kids and what and kids and older people can go home. So he was able to go home, and that's the last I knew. But I suppose he's been well. They've
Okay.
been well.
Thanks for telling me. Hello, Maria Fernanda.
Hello, how's everybody?
Good. Good, thank you.
Hi, dear. Thanks.
Okay. Did you guys check your grades?
Yes.
Everything is okay?
In my case, yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. So tonight we will review the last two readings that you had, since we didn't have a virtual encounter last week because it was a holiday. So we will review that tonight. So let's start with this image. So we have the image of the brain of a newborn and the brain of a child. So we have some green nets connections and blue nets. So what did the reading say about those nets? And what are those pink sections in the brain?
I think what is the amygdala and the hypothalamus?
Those are Broca and Wernicke's area. Those are the parts of the brain that are connected to language.
Okay, so
Here we have other image. So here we have Broca, which is closer to the eye, and Wernicke, and they communicate among each other or between them to help people understand what they listen and speak. So the previous one, this one, those big sections are Broca and Wernicke's. And what about the green and blue connections? What does the reading say about those connections?
I remember that the reader mentioned that in newborns they were born with somehow, or not somehow, but there was already a short development of those regions because of the hearing that babies develop when they are in the womb of their moms. So that's why newborns they have that image there that we can see that it's a bit developed. Of course, it develops more as children continue with their learning process and grow. Um, and that's what I remember.
Okay, very well, Maria Fernanda. So here we have some connections, but when the child gets older, there are even more connections. And so, as you
Yeah.
said, the
Okay.
Andres?
No, that it also said that those connections, like the way that the brain looks when it's a child, is very similar to the way that a brain may look for older people, well, adults. So kind of it means that when the kid is born, that network, the baby hasn't developed it as much, although there is already some part of the language networks there they haven't developed, but very quickly it develops a lot. So that's, I suppose that's why kids can learn language that easily, and even, well, this is what I suppose, even develop several languages at the same time.
Exactly. So we are born with the connections. They are a few, but we have some of them. So as we know, we all, when we get older, we learn more about language and we are able to communicate better. But this is just like the proof of a scanner that shows what is going on in the brain regarding the connections. Good.
Yes, it says that it will be impossible without those connections to allow the brain, these brain regions have exchange of communication. You know, they all have already, they all the time have to be interacting to receive the information from one place to another in the brain.
Exactly. Okay, then we have changes when we learn something. So what happens in the brain when we learn something?
Give me 1 minute, I'm looking at my notes.
Okay.
Just, I can't find it. Well, what it said is that the brain changes as it learns things. That is why kind of, I remember I wanted to say it, but there are changes in the brain as they learn. As we learn new things, the brain changes, and there are new connections that are made. Um, eh, so as we learn, our brain changes in different ways. I wanted to just look at it exactly.
Here I have.
Okay, the changes, Andres, are connected to the idea of having more nets, more connections
Yeah.
or more synapses. Okay, what happened or what does the reading about the research that presented the interference between L1 and L2 mention about learning new vocabulary or learning vocabulary of the L2? What happens?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry, if I cut out, it's something's wrong with the internet. I guess it's everyone being online at the same time. Sorry. But from what I understood, basically the influence of the first language into the other languages or language is that, like, I dare say most of the time, vocabulary that is learned will be mediated by that first language. For example, I don't know, like let's take any word, I don't know, car. When you learn the word car in any other language, uh, you may learn like the word, but the meaning of it, like what you understand by car, is already there from your mother language. So basically, any it's like a filter. Any new vocabulary that you learn goes through that filter, and from there it helps you to like make not make new meaning, but connect that new vocabulary with your prior knowledge and the meaning that you already have of the things that you know about. And I think that's pretty much the biggest influence of the main language in the rest of languages that you learn.
Exactly. So we already have an image of the object that express the or that is connected to the meaning. So we just learned the new word and made the association with the image that we already have in our minds. Good. And what does the reading say about learning new sounds?
So it says it depends on how similar the sounds are. So when the sounds of one language are similar to the other, meaning the sounds of the L2 are similar to the L1, it is going to be easier for the learner to identify the sound and to repeat the sound. While if the language is very different, is going to be very difficult, or not very difficult, more difficult for the learner to be able to produce that sound. But it also says that sometimes difficulties depend also on the speech ability of the learner. So basically, an example that I thought about was the CH and the SH in English and Spanish. That sometimes it's difficult for learners to identify the difference between SH and CH, because in language we only have the CH, the ch sound. Whereas in English we have SH and CH, so sometimes the learner is going to say things like teacher and not teacher, or chip and not ship, to mean that like the boat. And when you correct them, sometimes it's difficult for them to identify the exact difference between the SH and the CH, just because the SH sound, other than the sound sh when you're asking for silence, doesn't exist in the Spanish language. So that is kind of the thing with phonemes, that uh, the more different the the way of pronouncing, or the pronunciation is, or the sounds are, the phonemes are, the more difficult it's going to be for the learner. Whereas if it's similar, it's going to be easier. Um, that's what it says.
Right. So as you mentioned, there is not a that's not a problem of identifying the different sound, but producing the sound, the ability to produce the sound. So here we have like different sounds that we don't have in Spanish, and that may be a little bit difficult to pronounce for us because we don't have them in our language. Okay, very good.
But teacher,
Giovanni.
yes, well, I think that maybe it depends of what kind of language you are going to learn. For example, it's easier um, for Spanish people to have a good pronunciation when they are trying to learn Japanese, because the phoneme is almost similar. You can say perfectly, for example, mm, wakarimasen or ohayo godaimasu, and your pronunciation is similar. And you are not going to have any problem. That's when, for example, the German people, they want to learn English is easier because the th sound is similar, so it's easier for them to learn English without problem. But Spanish people, when try to speak English or other language with different pronunciation is just a little difficult for us. So we have to get used to the new pronunciation of the word. We have to practice all the time. If you want to, if you want to listen it like those people, like the native speaker. So you need to practice all the time.
Exactly. So it depends on how similar both languages are, L1 and L2. So as you mentioned, German and English are have more similarities than Spanish and English. So for a person who speaks German as an L1, will be easier to learn or to pronounce words in English as an L2. Exactly. Okay, thank you. Monica?
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me?
Good evening. Yes, we can hear you.
Hi. Okay. About the pronunciation topic, I just want to say I don't think it really is so easy, because I think you can evidence that when you speak to another person, and even for people like us who speak English. There are many different there are different kinds of pronunciation. Like, for example, English pronunciation in the USA, and pronunciation in British English, and there is definitely a lack of domain in pronouncing the words exactly as they are. You can, when you speak to other people who also speak another language as a native, and then they learn Spanish, you can hear how difficult, even if Spanish is quite a little bit easy in pronunciation terms, it's difficult for other people to speak Spanish, or to learn the exact same pronunciation as we do it, for example. The words are not always going to be the same, even if there are many similarities. Maybe you can get close, but you're not going to learn. I don't think there is anybody who can learn the exactly the same pronunciation as a native language when that's not your native language, when it's your second language.
What do you guys think about what Monica just said? That is impossible to for a person learning a second language to learn the pronunciation of those sounds that are from the second language.
Teacher, I want.
Go, Luis.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I have been reading that it's impossible when we know that we have to learn a language, we have to practice, and we have to practice all the time, and it's not automatically that we receive the language from our mother tongue, you know. So we need to be in the special environment, the special culture, the special people, and we need to be surrounded, according to what Monica said, is necessary to pronounce the same in the same way to another, for example, American people. My kids are in the United States since they were 4 years and 5 years, and for they it was for them, excuse me, for them it was very easy to practice, to learn, and to pronounce like an American. But for me, it's have been very difficult because I have not lived in a place for a long time. So we need to create our own environment to may pronounce in the same way that in a place, German, French, or in a different place, they pronounce their own language.
Okay, thank you, Luis. So as you mentioned, you had interference of your L1 because you learned your L1 first, but your kids,
Yes.
your children learn both languages at the same time. So
Yeah.
they didn't have that interference.
Mm-hmm.
Lina?
They have interference with the Spanish now. They don't want to speak in Spanish, you know.
So I
Okay.
guess the mother stopped talking to in Spanish to them. They got used to
Yeah,
speak only.
always. She's Colombian and they lived there a long time ago, but the mother always at home they say that they must speak in Spanish because their grandparents are Colombian too.
Okay, Lina.
Thanks, teacher. Good evening. Teacher, I think that it's very difficult to acquire the pronunciation of the native speaker if we don't live in that environment, in that country, because I think that I can, for example, my case, I can rise a level. I don't know what the level it could be, but for example, to try to have a C1 level, I think that it is necessary to go to that country or United States or England to stay for a long time to have the opportunity to interact with a lot of people. No, no, mi vida. And to acquire that accent, I think it's very difficult because, for example, I try to improve. So I listen to the music. I watch some movies. I try to repeat the pronunciation. I try to memorize the phonetics, but I think that is very difficult. I need that it's necessary to state for at least, I don't know, 6 months or at least 3 months, and to try to cut to interact the most the most that I can, because I think that it's very difficult to rise that level. But is my view, is my point of view. Maybe our classmates have another experience, but is I think that no.
Okay, thanks, Lina. What do you think about it, Andres?
Okay, that it wasn't impossible, and I don't agree with the impossible part. I do agree that as we get older and as as we get older and as we just studied, there's interference or whatever, it's going to be more difficult. Yes, and just as Lina said, if you're a learner that are learning as an adult, if you're probably going to need some immersion type of experience to learn the language. But I do think that it depends on a lot of things. I mean, I do think that you can get to a level of native or almost native language, depending on the situation and depending on several things. One is the environment, two is your age, and also is your individual abilities and skills. Not everybody is as easy to learn a language than others, and it just has to do with linguistic skills and skills that that you have, abilities that you have. So I do think that it's very dependent on many things, because like I told you last time, for example, I see my son and I see him like that. I told you that his school is almost a completely immersion school. You see that he's developing a level of pronunciation and of language from a very young age, that I'm sure he's going to have a very high level of English. And I've seen people that just leave at 18, 17, 20 years old, leave for another country, live there for 20, 30 years, and they're able to develop the language and the pronunciation. And even as Luis Felipe said, they start forgetting their native language. But you also see people that have lived 20 and 30 years in other countries, and they never are able to lose their accent and that would be just a thing of environment, but also of individual skills. So I think that it depends on a lot of things, but I do think that it's possible to develop that kind of pronunciation and of language in certain people and in certain environments and with certain situations.
Teacher, I would like to ask to my classmates one question, especially to three classmates that are with us. Okay, as human beings, we are the same, I know, and I know you believe the same. But professionals, you are different. You are better than some of us, including me, because I would like to talk. I would like to know, for example, about Andres Felipe, Christian, and Maria Fernanda. Maybe more, but I don't have not here the other students. How did they learn to pronounce or to speak in English? So I would like to receive a little 1 minute of each one of them, Christian and Felipe and Maria Fernanda, why did they learn their English and how did they improve their pronunciation and everything?
Yes, I like math. Excuse me. For example, I enjoy to listen to Mafi pronunciation. I like that.
Yes, and Christian and Felipe, I am fascinated with that, you know.
Well, can you guys hear me now?
Yes, hello, Christian.
You can answer, please.
Hi, Professor. Hi, guys. Well, when I went to the States when I was very small, when I was 4 years old. I was and I lived there for 20 years in Los Angeles, California. I studied there. I was, like Andres said, I was in the environment. I had to go to McDonald's. I had to ask in English, can I have a hamburger, a Big Mac, apple, French fries. I was there in the environment, and I stayed there for 20 years. And I don't remember how I learned it. I don't remember. I remember going to preschool. I remember going to, especially, well, preschool, but I don't remember how I learned it. I don't know.
Living there.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Christian. And
okay.
Maria Fernanda and Andres, please.
Mafe, go.
Is Mafi here?
No, I don't see
here.
her.
I'm here. Yes,
okay.
I was going to say something when Lina mentioned. Thank you for what you mentioned. I think I was a strong believer that that the language was only, or a person was only able to acquire a language by being exposed to it, like by living in another country and having the experience to be like involved in the culture of the language itself. But that was like my thinking until I met, well, like 10 years ago, I met a guy who was a coworker, and he used to work at the same language institute where I used to work. And I just assumed that he had the opportunity to live and grow in another country because his English was totally native. And then it was not after, I don't know, after a long time after meeting him, that I found out that he had acquired the language just by watching TV and watching movies and listening to music in English. Seeing, of course, starting at an early age. I'm not saying that it's not possible to learn the language when you are older, but for example, what Christian just mentioned, that he doesn't remember how he learned it. Yeah, and I was thinking he didn't learn the language; he acquired the language. Because when you are exposed to the language and the culture, you just acquire it. It's like you just follow, like by not imitation, but yes, you just model the language that you are being exposed to. So for Lina and Luis, I don't think it's impossible to improve your language. It's just the more you are exposed to the language, the more you're going to, or the better your language is going to become. I don't think that I have a native language or native, that I don't speak a native English. I did have the opportunity, not as young as Christian, but I was able to travel in summer camps or other trips, being like for a month or so, both in the States and in England, like when I was 14. But I always had language classes at school or at language institutes. Like my school was not bilingual, but we did have English regularly during the week. And plus we had some extra hours in an institute. But it was until I had the need to use the language and communicate that I improved my English. But I think, as I said, the more you're exposed to the language and like a good not necessarily quality, but a good spoken language, then, and reading, of course, reading also helps you a lot. The better you'll get in it.
Thank you, Maria Fernanda.
In my case, I studied at San Carlos School in Bogota, which is actually one of, I think, the best school in Colombia, or one of the best. So in my school, I studied English since I was very young, 5, 6 years old. But I actually, in that school, part of what they did was we learned, I do remember, for example, that the first 6 months, 8 months in school, 6 months, I think, you didn't even have Spanish class, nor nothing in Spanish, everything was in English all the time. And I actually can tell you that I learned to write in English first, rather than in Spanish. That was just the way that school did it. So we learned to write and speak and whatever in English since we were 5, 6 years old. So it was like an English environment all the time, and then we did it like the opposite that most schools do it. We didn't learn in Spanish and then transfer to English, so the other way around. So that's why I have never lived in another country. I've traveled, yes, sometimes to the States, like 2-3 week vacation, but I haven't lived there. But I also feel that I always liked language. That was always my favorite subjects, both Spanish and English. I loved writing, I loved reading, I still do. So I think that made me improve a lot, because I did practice it a lot, and I enjoyed it. And then also the other thing that helped me a lot, just as Mafe said, was once I graduated from school, I took an international exam that I forget the name, and I did have a high level, but I took an exam last year in order to like for the thing that we have to do to not see English here in the university. And I've improved my level of English since I graduated from school, and that is just because I feel that as I've been having to teach it, I've learned more about it, because I've been forced to read, I've been forced to correct, I've been forced to pay a lot of attention to details such as grammar and spelling and whatnot, because I have to correct my students. So that also helped me a lot, practicing it a lot. And the other thing that I do is I do think that English is our tool, our work tool, basically. So I think that we have to improve it, and work on it. So I don't see movies with subtitles. I don't watch, movies with subtitles. All the time I'm listening to podcasts and things from the States or from other countries, or from England. I'm all the time watching videos in YouTube and whatnot. I all the time do it, just as a way of doing it. I read the news in English. I try to all the time practice English, because I think that I can't lose it. Yes, I also studied French for 6 months in the Alianza Francesa, and when I studied French, I've always had like the skills for the language, so I was able to advance a lot in those 6 months, because I saw like 4 hours a day. And then when I ended my studies in French, I was like what you would call like an A2 level, probably. Like I could hold a conversation, read a little. Well, but today I can't speak it. I mean, I never practice it again. So today, maybe if I see something written, I can understand some French, but I'm not able to understand even a short video, and I can't speak it. So I do think that if you don't practice it a lot, you lose it. You lose a little. So you have to all the time be doing it. That's kind of my experience.
Okay. Teacher, thank you very much. I want to say thank you, because I don't want to take your time. And my question was without underestimate my other classmates, because all of you have a good English level. So I appreciate that you share with us, and you give the time for sharing of this topic at this moment, because we are finishing the term. So I needed to know about how did they practice or learn their L2. Thank you very much.
Okay, good. So what we can see is that the three of them had a lot of exposure to the language, a lot of input. But in Christian's case, as Maria Fernanda mentioned, he acquired it in a natural way, while well, the three of them also put a lot of effort on using the language and learning it and practicing it. But as Andres mentioned, there are these four aspects that you see on the screen that are also related to or associated to the idea of learning a language, or factors that influence students learning.
Teacher, I want to say something.
Giovanni.
Yes, I agree with my classmate. Yes, they are right. But I really want to tell you that it's very important when you have the opportunity to go to another country. Maybe you have the chance to practice 24/7 a day your English and your pronunciation. But I also think that you will be able to learn English in your own country without leaving of the country here. But it's more difficult, but not impossible. Maybe what you have to do is to get together with different bilingual students or teacher or maybe the foreign people here in Colombia, for example. I meet a couple of English teacher that they didn't have the opportunity to live in the country, but they have an excellent English because they always speak English all the time at home, outside, whatever, inside of the house. They always watch the movies in English series. It's very important to listen in podcasts every day and whatever to learn a lot of vocabulary, so on. But I think that, for example, you will be able to go to the Candelaria, this neighborhood in Bogota. There are a lot of foreign people, and they get together. Maybe you have the opportunity to talk with them, or maybe to make some friends, foreign friends, who you can practice your English, and maybe they can correct your pronunciation. Is a good exercise. Another page in English in the internet, you will be able to enter to the Meetup. Meetup is an excellent page where there are different groups of English. So you get together with that group of people. Almost always there are foreign people over there. You will be able to share different topics every week. But if you had a chance maybe to go two or twice a week, it will be excellent because you need to practice your English all the time. You need to practice English every day if you really want to improve English. So it's different when studying English. It's different when you teach English because when you start to teach English, you learn double because you need to prepare the class. That is very important because you need to transmit that knowledge to the students. So you study different or the different wave, and you are commitment to have a lot of information because it's important because maybe the student they are going to ask you different kind of questions. If you are a teacher, you have to have all the information in your mind because you need to give them a excellent reply what they needed. So I think that maybe it's possible to learn English here like a native speaker, but it's just a little difficult. Maybe there is a technique that is shadowing. If you really want to follow the accent, for example, the New York people, you will be able to do it. What you have to do is to follow the that accent and to try to imitate. Yes, it's easy. It's not so no impossible. Maybe if you like the British accent, you will be able to listen in some podcasts in English, and you will be able to do it all the time. That's not mean that okay. What I mean is the following. I'm going to talk about Sofia Vergara. Sofia Vergara has been living in New York or in the United States for a long time. But she have a very strong accent. Maybe it's good for her because the strong accent made her or become famous person, and a lot of American people all around the world like the accent of Sofia Vergara. Sofia Vergara understands English 100%, speak English perfectly, but she didn't want to change the accent because she doesn't like it. But there are a lot of Colombian people, actor or whatever, who speak English fluently without problem, living over there or maybe living like here. As I told you, the couple of the English teachers that I told you, they speak English perfect and they never have the opportunity to leave for the country.
Okay, Johnny. Yes. So, as Andres and Maria Fernanda mentioned, the amount of time they have put in learning the language, practicing it, the effort they put, made that they speak the language as the way they speak currently. So
Can I make just one last intervention? If it's possible, if we're not running out of time, of course.
sure.
Uh, yeah, well, yeah. In my case, I don't want to talk too much about me, but in my case, I was exposed. My mom is a teacher as well, and I was fortunate enough to be able to, thanks to her work, study in an international school, and that's why I was in contact with English. But what I want to bring to this, and especially because we are talking about linguistics, maybe not applied linguistics, but um, more like practical linguistics, I guess. I don't know if you guys remember all the articulation points and all of this branch of stuff that we saw in linguistics. I think that is very, very important. And even like right now, I live with my girlfriend. She's Canadian, and like now I realize how many mistakes one can make, and that many times we try to speak, and it obviously we try to express our ideas, which is the, but we as non-native speakers, we have to make an extra effort to be very, very conscious of how we are pronouncing words. That has to do a lot with what Giovanni just said, which is obviously practice, practice, practice. But a really good exercise is really being just about how you're moving your mouth, because you move your mouth very differently in English that you do in Spanish and in French and pretty much in every language. So an exercise that you can do is record yourself. Record yourself saying the same sentence. I don't know, like maybe read a paragraph from your favorite book, something like this. The first time you read it, just read it like you normally would. Then the second time, try and do it again, but be very, very cautious of how you're moving your mouth, where you're placing your lips, your tongue, where you're placing your tongue, what kind of noises you're doing, and that's gonna help you a lot. And it helps me a lot to improve my pronunciations. And I just said in the chat, I don't know if everyone is looking at the chat, but feel free if you wanna add me on my WhatsApp. It's right there, and you want to speak more English, I am totally up to that. Just do it. We have to help each other. We're all in the same guilds as teachers, so you can count on me. And if you need any other kind of suggestion, comment, support, just feel free to ask me. But that's one of the things that I did when I was first starting to speak. And yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you, Felipe.
Thanks, Pipe.
Good. Let's move to the last reading that you had. That was about minor brain injuries. So the reading mentioned a couple of them, and the idea is that since we have a lot of contact with students, the amount of time that we share with them in the classroom is high. So we can actually identify some differences that some students might have in classroom, because since we are not doctors or we have not a lot of knowledge about the brain, we just can detect, identify like some changes in the way they act, in the way they behave. So we will review that. For example, Asperger's syndrome. So you guys remember what are the key or the behavior that they have, that they usually have, that make you identify they might have some problems?
Professor, I had a kid with this. I don't want to call it difficulty. I would go like for um, I don't know how I would call that, but I had a kid last year in fifth grade, and he suffered from that. And he was very quiet, but he was very smart. His favorite subject was math, and language, and science. And in and at the end, like in the exams, he got 100 in all of them. But in the breaks, he was a very lonely kid. He wanted to be alone. He used to tell me, because I was his homeroom teacher, and they used to tell me, okay, Professor Christian, go and talk to him, go play basketball with him, go play volleyball. And I used to invite him, like in the second break, but he didn't go. And then I started to walk around the breaks, and I used to see him lonely walking around, and that's him. He was very quiet and lonely. He didn't talk to nobody. If he talked to the big guys, like not his age, but like to teachers and all that. But not, he didn't look like for his own age kids to play with. No, he was a loner, but he was very smart. And now he's in sixth grade and he's doing very well. And he's still the same attitude, quiet and all that. And he's a very nice kid.
Uh-huh. So what you mentioned is important. So those that are quiet and lonely, they might have a problem regarding any syndrome.
Yeah.
They might be depressive issues, or they might have Asperger's.
No,
Uh,
it was medical. It's medical that, yeah. It's how to say that? It's confirmed that he suffers from that.
okay, good. Yeah. So
Yeah.
our job is to identify those differences and just tell parents and tell if we have a psychologist at the school, so we can talk to that person. But then they will, parents and the psychologists, they will like be in charge of taking the child to the parents, to take the child to the doctor and see what's going on, and with uh, tests and well other with different tests they will identify exactly what the student has.
What he has, correct. Yeah.
Yeah, and the question is how you deal with a kid like that. I mean, if you have no experience, you can ask the psychologist or the parents. But how you deal? Do you any of you have any experience with any of these kids?
But it's very easy to identify him. If you have 24 kids and one of them, you can identify him. It's very simple.
Yeah, but I don't mean to identify them, but to treat them, to teach them, to spend time with them. I know, you know.
Yeah, once we identify they are different, they don't talk to other students. Well, that's if they don't go to the doctor and the doctor doesn't help them, it's not gonna be the same for the, or they are not gonna learn the same at the same pace than the other students. So we cannot do more than just telling the parents and the psychologists what is going on with the student, because we are not trained to treat those syndromes and help the students move
and
or
also
or
because
learn.
and also because there are different levels of the syndromes, and they have different types of interests, because it says that they are also several times, oftentimes they are focused on there are some things that interest them a lot and others that don't. So basically I think that you have to have a lot of support from the psychology department or counseling department in the school, and also like based on the diagnosis that is made, usually the people who are treating them are going to give some recommendations, and it's good to follow them, because I, for example, have one kid in 10th grade, and he's very good in math, and he's very good with technology and those types of things, but he doesn't like language at all. He doesn't like reading at all. So for example, in his case, he never complies with the things that he has to do in my subject, and he always like
Oh man,
loses it, because fails the subject, because he just
that's the
doesn't
teacher.
do anything. Yeah, the teacher. So what we had to do was have a meeting with him and the psychologist, and like reach some agreements. Like for example, he's not going to he outright, he from the get-go told me, I'm not going to read the books because it's just not interesting for me. But he does have a nice level of English. He just doesn't like those type
Yeah.
of things. So we had to get to an agreement that I would send him some support videos where he could see also the book, the story in the book, so he was able to answer the questions. And so I think that in that case it's not just a teaching thing, it's also like having the support of the psychologist and being able to reach agreements depending on the interest of the kid, and how can you help them, and the severity of the syndrome, because those syndromes can have different levels of different levels present in the kids.
I had another case, Professor. Oh, take 1 minute. I had another case this year because we pick up notebooks once per cycle to correct what kids do in their notebooks. And when I picked up this girl's notebook, I saw her handwriting and her letters like upside down, and I said, "Oh my God, this is not normal." And then when I called parents, she suffers from how do you call this dyslexia?
Dyslexia, yeah.
And that's why, and that's her medical let's say problem. And she used to write upside down. She didn't have, her spelling mistakes were terrible. Oh man, with this girl I suffered a lot, but at the end she's hanging there. Now she's in our virtual encounters every day, and now she's typing it. Since she's typing, it's much better for us to correct.
All right, that's the other way to detect a person who's having problems reading and writing. The person might have
Exactly.
dyslexia.
Yeah.
Okay. Maria Fernanda.
Yes, teacher, thank you. I just wanted to add, if for the previous condition, the Asperger syndrome, I don't remember if I shared this with you guys at the beginning of this class or in a previous one, that I had a girl in 4th grade. She's now in 6th, so this was 2 years ago. And she was smart also. She was brilliant in writing, but she, yes, of course, you could tell that she had difficulties with her social skills, and that's mainly what they, or how they how do you say that, how they express or how they show this type of condition. With they do not have, or they are not capable to like read the mood or the intention of others, how they are reacting to them. So they of course they will feel all the time like I don't know what word to use, but like extremely sensitive maybe on that part, on that social part, and how anyone would just come to them and treat them. So this girl, she had very good like overall performance, academic performance, but she will struggle a lot, and not necessarily building relationships or friendships, because she's been, as I mentioned, I had her in 4th grade and she had been at school there since 1st grade. So there she had already like a strong bond with some friends, and of course year after year the coordinators at school made sure that they were not going to be set in different classes whenever they would start a new year. They always kept them together just to support that friendship that this girl had. But she would struggle a lot whenever she was in class and she would wanted to participate. I mean, not necessarily that she didn't want to participate, but she had like the intention, but it would take her a long time to put the words or the ideas together to be able to say like, or give her thoughts. Yes, so it was mainly that.
Okay, good. So if the person has problems to organize ideas, to communicate, if the person has problems to read and write, if the person doesn't make eye contact, is very isolated, or doesn't have that emotional empathy, doesn't make eye contact, so those are signs that something is wrong with the child, and that is necessary to tell parents and the psychologist to have a second, to have a test, or to have a second, let's say, to have a, that the doctor tells what is going on and see if really there is a problem with the student.
Yeah, because you know that sorry, the thing is, we have to be very careful with how we say things, and how we like kind of identify things, because because, for example, in our case, we had a girl in a school, and she hadn't been tested, and most of the teachers thought she had dyslexia, and then they took it like to the neuro or whatever, and there they did some studies, and they eventually noticed that she had an issue was with her eyes, not dyslexia, but something in her eyes. She didn't like focus well, or well, I don't remember like the specifics, but there was an issue with her eyes. And then they gave her they did like a special treatment. They gave her like some glasses and a lot of things, and she improved a lot. And it wasn't dyslexia, it was more like a physical thing. So sometimes like you can see a lot of symptoms and think that you know, but at the end of the day, we're teachers, we're not doctors. So it's good that they do get the right diagnosis, because sometimes some disorders can, or some of these conditions may be similar to others, or may look like something but end up being another, and we just don't have to diagnose it.
Okay, good, Andres. So as you mentioned, the first thing that parents do is to take the child to the doctor to see if they need glasses. That's sometimes we see now that they can read and write well, but the problem is just they need glasses. Monica, and then Maria Fernanda.
Thank you, teacher. Yes, two things. I don't want to be long because I don't want to be too repetitive, but I just wanted to say about Asperger. That is, it's very difficult for these kids who have this disorder to socialize, because they can't read people emotionally, which is something that Maria Fernanda said. So that's why they are isolated. That's why they don't socialize with other kids, and that is something that's quite difficult uh, to in a classroom. That's quite difficult because I've had the experience. So, but anyway, and another thing I wanted to say is that that is how important for us as teachers to. That's why it's important for us to first to detect that there is something going on with these kids, because we could help in the diagnosis. We could help tell the parents, well, there's something going on with these kids' social skills or math skills or whatever, reading, writing, whatever, so they can detect the disorder. And another aspect is as in terms of strategies. Now we need to have some strategies. Like, for example, they were saying before, I don't remember who, about, for example, now the virtual classes, they couldn't read the handwriting, but now it's easier for them to understand what the children are writing, because they are typing it. So maybe that's one strategy we could use. Another one was about the guy who didn't want to read books, so send them videos. That's another. I mean, they could be seen as good strategies to work with these kids. That's it.
Thank you, Monica. Yes, usually those kids need like personalized lessons, and those schools that have students that suffer from any of those illnesses, they have just like 7 students in the class, plus a person who helps with the class and is working with the child that has the disorder or the illness. So they can be in a class with other students that don't have any illness, but they need a special care and extra help from other person in class. Maria Fernanda.
Yeah, just one more quick thing related to also to what Fernando mentioned a while ago, that I agree with him when he says that it's not easy, and he was referring to how to face or treat and help these kids in our classes. It may be easy to identify that a particular kid has somewhat of a difficulty or condition, but of course, it wouldn't be only up to us. I think the school, and I think it's in the inclusion, I don't know if it's a law or something, but the education ministry is asking, or has been asking, I don't know for how long ago, the schools to implement or to evaluate their inclusion policy. And at school, for example, this year or last year, we received a girl with Down syndrome in kinder, and for example, the girl that I mentioned with the Asperger syndrome, and there are a couple of other students, but it's not like our target population per se. But of course, the school has to open the doors for anyone who wants to be at the school. So it's also having the school provide us with I wouldn't say the training, because that is not just take a workshop and you're going to be ready to assume or deal with these situations, but maybe hire a specific people that are prepared to work with these kids. I know that there are schools, it's just that our school is not like that. We have like between 25 to 32 students per class. And as I said, our target, or not target population, but mainly the students are not with these conditions. But I know that there are schools that are totally prepared to receive these improvement in each of the kids. And related to what Andres Felipe was saying a moment ago also, they have such particular characteristics that are individual for each of the kids. So we cannot just generalize and say we're going to do this way or the other way. We just have to, it's a process, and it's a process in which they need to get to know us and we need to get to know them, and work together, and of course build rapport with the students as well, and work along with the other specialized tutors or people that have to be part of the whole process. It's not only the teacher and the family or the student, it involves also coordinators and psychologists and everyone, of course. That was it. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. So again, as you mentioned, those students need special attention. And what we can do is to tell the psychologist, for example, if we identified a person who doesn't focus his attention because doesn't sleep well, or has a negative self-evaluation, as you see on the screen, might be because the person suffers from depression or because he's anxious. And so the psychologist task is to find out more about the student, and then talk to the parents, and the parents need to take the child to the doctor, where the child is going to have some tests in order to find out if there is really a damage in the brain. For example, we talked about the amygdala, which is a part of the brain that is in charge of fear and emotions. So with the scanners, they will find out if there is any damage in that region. Here we have an image of a person who suffers from depression and the normal brain. So as you see, there is more activity in the normal brain that is in color green compared to the compared to the brain of a person who suffers from depression, the person has less activity. Well, so as Andres mentioned, we are not doctors. We cannot diagnose that. We just can identify those symptoms and talk to parents and the psychologist. So they will be in charge of taking the child to the doctor and find out if what is going on. Good. Anything else you want to add about this or questions you might have?
I have one small thing, teacher, to share with you. I have a different case to Andres Felipe. In my case, I have a special, he has autism, you know, but he is the best in English. You know, he like English all the time. Despite of he would like to ask all the time for reading. I call his name all the time, Felipe. What are you doing? He's all the time paying attention. He's not seeing anybody. He doesn't or he doesn't worry about the emotions, our emotions of the other people. But he's paying attention, looking at his notebook. But he's waiting that I call his name to participate. And my school is a very small school, and they have an inclusion program. So they receive a lot of different cases, but they receive with a special company, with a nurse or with a psychology or psychologist. So in the case of Felipe, that is the best in ninth grade. He has maybe B1 level of English. The nurse told me that he is very violent without her company, you know. So I have not seen that, but in that caught my attention because he's autism. He suffers of autism. He's very smart, and he's violent at home and in different places. But in my class, he's very happy. You know, it's a very special thing that happens to me this year. It's the first time that I work with that kind of people.
Okay, Andres, I think he mentioned that there are different types of autism. Some of them focus their attention on one special area. In the case of your student, is English. So I guess he feels quiet and at ease in your class because of that. But not all students that suffer from autism behave the same way because there are different types.
I was gonna say something, Professor.
Christian.
It gets more complicated when you call parents, and for parents to accept that their kid has that condition is the worst thing because there are some parents that don't accept it. And they say, no, my kid is normal. At home, he studies, he works a lot, but in school, you see what I'm saying? So it's for them to accept it is the worst thing. And I've been there in meetings where parents say that their kid is normal, but the kid has real big difficulties.
I guess it will be easy for parents, but that's why the person that should talk to them is the psychologist.
Yeah, every time there's those kind of meetings, psychologists back you up, but some parents don't accept it.
Yeah, I guess it's not easy.
Yeah.
Any other idea you guys want to share? Question?
Teacher, good evening.
Hello, John.
Hello, teacher. Yes, teacher, according to the topic that my classmates are speaking about, they are giving a very good information. I want to say something according to the school where I am working. The principal say to the teachers that the principal idea is to identify the students, but finally the psychology is the last person that give the diagnostic for the students, right? Because sometimes we believe that the student has maybe the lessons, some of them, but I think that finally the psychology have the final result of the problem. Is right?
Exactly. That's what we discuss.
Yeah, okay, that's it.
Thank you, John. Guys, I appreciate your participation tonight. It's our last encounter, so I will upload the final grade tonight. So please check it and let me know, email me if there is any mistake, because I need to publish the final grade tomorrow in ASIS, right? So what you have in the virtual room now is the Excel file without the last grade, that is the one that we have for this encounter. So I will update it with the grade of tonight's encounter, and please check it, right? So just give me...
Excuse me. Where is the Excel file uploaded? I was trying to look for it, but
you need to click on assessment, the link assessment, and you will find it.
Okay, I was looking in this course and calificaciones, don't worry. Yes,
Okay.
it's there. Thank you.
All right. So in 10 minutes, I will upload the final grade. So please check it and let me know through an email if there is any mistake. Please.
Sure.
Okay,
Thank you very
perfect.
much, Ms.
Okay,
Ellis.
teacher, thank you.
Thank you all, guys.
Thank
Some
you.
of
Take
you.
care.
The best for everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you
teacher
very much.
Samai. It was a pleasure. One more
Please
time
wash
to
your
see you.
hands. Wash your hands. Wash your hands.
Yes.
All the time. All
Okay,
the time.
Absolutely.
Yes, stay
Yes.
safe, please.
Each 2 hours.
Stay home, guys. God bless all of you and your families.
Bye.
Christian, I hope your family will be better. And
Thank you,
see you
Luis.
soon. See you soon, all of you.
Oh yes, stay
It was
home,
an
please.
amazing
It's
opportunity
really
to share
important.
with you. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, guys. Love
Have
you
a good
all.
night.
Peace.
Okay.
Take
See
care.
you
Bye
guys.
Teacher,
bye.
thank
God
you
bless.
very
Love you
much.
guys. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye bye, everybody.
Bye.
Great
Bye.
topics.
Bye.
Thank you.
You're
Okay.
welcome.
Yes,
Have a good night.
I learned a lot.
Bye-bye.
God bless you.
thank you.
Bye bye.
Sueño.